Second now. Welcome back to Boss Uncaged podcast. So, a little funny story is that we tried to shoot this bad boy episode 2 days ago, and we had technical difficulties, which is always a funny thing when you're a podcaster and you start to do these live podcasts. That anything could happen. A baby could be crying in the background, someone could accidentally slip out a fart out of nowhere and not even know what's going on. So, we're here now and we're live, and hopefully the connections will be moving as they should. So going back to this individual that we're interviewing today, right? I'm going to name him the screening boss, and we're going to be talking about several different things and how he even got that title, and why did he go from one industry to the next. But, kind of going a little backstory. I met this individual through Donnie, which you guys probably remember from season 2 and from Success Champions Networking and Success Summit where I spoke at last year. This is Donnie's older brother. Now, I always say that younger brothers get more badass from their older brothers beating their ass over a period of time. So, Keith, why don't you give us a little bit more about who you are and kind of tell us a little bit how you used to, beat your brother's ass from time to time. And as soon as I say that, the network goes out. This is hilarious. Gotta love the internet. All right, let's see. We can get
And of course, as soon as you say technical difficulty,
it happens.
the exact same thing they told me wasn't going to happen just happened. So now we're good for an hour.
Well, so let's just go ahead and tell everybody a little bit more about you, Keith.
Thanks for having me on. Um, Keith Boivin was in the medical sales, disposable and device industry for over 27 years. The last 10 to 15 years spent at executive level, sales education, sales training, sales leadership, and things like that. For 27 years, I had decided to get out of the medical industry and get into backgrounds. A good friend of mine over in the Tampa, Florida area had an idea about a company that he wanted to acquire and had me do some research.
Mhm.
And we joined forces and created and developed Ezactis. And we've had a lot of fun with this. This has been the most amazing journey in my life. First time being an entrepreneur, and like you said earlier, being part of the SCN networking chapter is introduced me to some incredible people like yourself. So it's been a great journey.
Very cool, very cool. So I mean, like all the things you can get into. I mean, obviously, coming from like a general sales background and having other opportunities in your career. And I know you're saying that your friend kind of put it on your lap, but I mean, all of us have these friends that come to us from time to time and say, "Hey, I got this new idea, or I got this new thing." So why did this particular day did you say yes to that friend about what you're doing now?
It's the past history. We especially me being in a position where I was hiring a lot of individuals across the country. The background check was a tool that we utilized and to disqualify specific people. And there were instances where we hired the person we thought was the right choice, only to have the background check come back and tell us that for one reason or another they were ineligible to be hired for the company. One of them was a very close friend of mine, and unfortunately, that person had a DUI from 17 years ago. And since we had company vehicles, the insurance would not cover her. So we didn't have a choice not to hire her. So it got me thinking, though, when I started looking into background checks, what is in a background check? And when I started doing the research and figuring out how many background checks are actually being done on a monthly basis, and what goes into them, and the information that comes out, I made a lot of phone calls into old colleagues and friends and asked them, "Do you run background checks?" And they're all saying, "Of course we do." I'm like, "Great. What information do you get?" And they're like, "We don't know." And it was very overwhelming for me to hear that most companies don't know what they're actually pulling as far as information. So I think that's what got the push for me to get into this, was to help educate the market, help educate the customers. And I can sit here and tell you all day long the different ambiances and everything else about background checks, but for this company, what people are getting is me and my passion to jump in and learn, educate, figure out what your business is, what your business does, and then put together some packages that fit exactly with what you're looking for. And that's the part I enjoy the most is creating those relationships and helping other companies succeed.
So I mean, with that, I mean, I think you have another little niche on top of that. I mean, obviously there's companies out there that do what you do, but you have more of an unfair advantage where you kind of own the software in addition to
But
that,
it,
right?
yeah, that is correct. So out of about 1,300 companies here in the United States, only 1% own the software that allows you to actually do the background check. So we have quite a few customers that are background check companies themselves that utilize our software for their background checks. We've ran into some situations too with some large companies based outside the United States. Even the largest company in this space do not have any US based customer service. So you're calling call centers in South America or India or Philippines or other places around the country, and you're trying to talk to somebody about a problem, and they're reading from a screen. So when we set this up, we actually have live customer service, 7 a.m., 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. You're getting a live software technician. And then we have 24/7 chat support, a chat feature inside your admin site. So you're talking to somebody. Owning the software allows us to do things faster, uh, less inexpensive, and we get a lot of information back to these companies for that reason. So
So I mean, you brought up the key word of expenses, and this is kind of like we had talked about this before, but I mean, like on average, nationally, like how many background checks are being done on a month-to-month basis?
So the research we found, there's close to a billion background checks being done here in the United States every single month. And when you stop and think about who's doing a background check, you'll understand where those numbers come from. And you know, just look at the education world, and teachers and admin staffs and volunteers, youth sports organizations, things like that. Let alone just employment companies and things like that. So our software currently handles just under 1.2 million background searches a month. Um, we also don't require any contracts. So with a lot of companies to drive that pricing down, they require a 3 to 5 year commitment with a certain volume level. We don't believe in that. Um, you can log in, you can register your account, and you can start and stop whenever you want. There is no contract. You can run one report a year. You can run 10,000 a week. There's no small, medium, large. We want every customer to come in and enjoy the platform. I want to educate you and train you on how easy the platform is to use. So it's funny because a lot of people ask me all the time, is this customer too small for you? And I'm like, no way. I've got customers that run 3 background checks a year, and I enjoy teaching them just as much as I enjoy teaching anybody else.
Hmm. So so like, what's the average price for a background check?
Well, in this market, 80% of our background checks are what we call a basic background check, which is pulling the minimal information to hire an employee. The average industry average for that's around $35, and takes 3 to 5 days to turn around. The cost from us is $9.95. We guarantee that background check back to you in 24 hours or less. And right now, our average turnaround time is just under 4 hours.
Okay, so for the number of people out there, right? So for the accountants and the CPAs that are listening to these numbers and he's nonchalantly saying it, let me just recap a little bit. So he said maybe roughly around 1.5 million transactions per month. Average transaction is about $30 per month. Your net from that is essentially $25 because you give or take. So roughly you're telling me that you're grossing somewhere around like 25 million per month.
Well, that's not totally accurate because remember, a lot of our customers are actually background check companies. So when
Okay.
they're doing business with us in bulk, think of us like a Sam's Club.
Okay.
So when we have these large wholesale customers, obviously their pricing goes way down from there. But when we're going direct to the consumer, um, we have the most competitive pricing in the market,
Mhm.
and yeah, still, I mean, we're still creating a lot of monthly revenue through this,
Yeah.
which just allows us to do a lot of great things. Allows us to, be in touch with the customers, and allows us to have that live customer service team that's based here, and
Mhm.
live chat support 24/7, 365. So a lot of cool things we were able to do with that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like hearing you rattle off these numbers and I'm analyzing like this data is kind of like who would have thought that that industry would have been so lucrative? Like, I mean, when
Yeah.
you went into it, did you know that? Did you know that, okay, this is going to be a million or tens of million-dollar opportunity, or was that something that you learned as you went
No,
forward
it's
with the process?
definitely something we learned as we got into this industry. So we didn't realize the amount of volume. We didn't realize the depth of the background checks people would get into. I mean, even though we have a very inexpensive way to conduct a background check, we still have companies that pay us over $150 for a single background because of the amount of information that they are looking for. And it all depends on the industry that you're in. It depends on the level of the position you're applying for. So if you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, they're going to spend two or $300 to do their homework on that applicant. If you're an auto mechanic working for an oil change service, they're probably going to do a little bit less of a search on someone like that. So
Gotcha.
a lot of factors go into it, which is why I love talking to people and finding out what they do, how they do it, and how we can help.
Hmm. So with the searches that you do, I mean, obviously, I would think you have local, you have national, and do you have a global search? And obviously, is that a price difference between those search levels?
There is a big pricing variance when you leave the United States. We are truly a global company. The only country that we cannot perform background checks in is North Korea. Outside of that, everything is available. So here in the United States, there's four different levels of background checks. So you can run a nationwide criminal, you can run a statewide, you can run a certain county, or you can run a nationwide federal, which crosses over state lines and things like that. When we run those four criminal background checks, it always includes the District of Columbia, it includes Guam, it includes Puerto Rico. But then we can go up into Canada, we can go down to Mexico, we can add those on if that's necessary.
Mm.
And then if you have global sales reps, like a lot of these medical device and manufacturing companies do, you've got international sales reps, and we can perform those background checks on them as well.
Mm. So I mean, I get the next level of the question is like what the accuracy, right? I mean, obviously, in any system, there's always some loophole or backdoor or bending or breaking the rules. Like, how accurate are these reports? I mean, what room of error is available in them?
Yeah, so what I tell people a lot is the people, especially the companies that own the software, right? We all pull the information from the same data. We're contracting with the U.S. federal government, the state government agencies, counties, the courthouses, and things like that. So we're all pulling data from the same information. The difference is how fast you can do it, how inexpensively you can do it, and um, and then how you compile that information. So when you're done, when you run one background that might have seven searches, all that comes back to you in one easy to read Excel or PDF format that you now have on an electronic file on that person.
And I guess the next question is like, how current is it? I mean, let's say if I get a DUI on Tuesday, on the first, when would that actually show up on the record?
It depends on the courts. So in some of these backgrounds, you'll see even if it's a if you were even if that charge got dismissed, it would still show up on certain reports. It would show up on some records that says you were charged with a DUI, even if it was dismissed. If it was a murder, if it was grand theft auto, whatever the charge might be, there are still reports that will show that you were actually charged. So the reports are pretty clear when it says charged. It'll tell you the finding, guilty, not guilty. It'll tell you if it's a misdemeanor, a felony. It'll tell you the date, time, court, any fines that were levied against you. It's pretty definitive and accurate reporting on their end. So, and all we do is we go out and contract with close to 70 different sources, and we dig in and grab that information and data that's available and just bring it back to you.
Nice, very nice. So I mean, I'm just listening to you, and it's funny that hearing you speak, and you first of all, you have passion about what you're doing. Second of all, you sound like you used to work for like the FBI or the CIA. So like, let's talk about like historically, kind of like your background. Let's take it back to you as kids. You know, what was it like growing up with like your other brother and Donnie? What was that like?
Yeah, so we grew up on a farm in Kansas, out in the middle of nowhere, and we grew up riding horses, hunting, fishing. Our closest neighbor was that had kids our age was a mile away. So we were riding our BMX bikes on gravel roads just to get down to the neighbor's house to be able to play. So a lot of responsibility growing up with just the activity we had with the animals on the farm and everything else. Our dad drove a truck over the road. Our mom worked two jobs. So we were on our own quite a bit. So all three of us had a lot of responsibility at an early age. And I think that that defined our drive and our work ethic for the rest of our lives. So, Donnie obviously has a very successful success champion networking, plus three or four of the companies that he runs. Our older brother retired from the Marine Corps after 25 years and is enjoying retirement, but he's still working his butt off with woodworking company, something that he enjoys doing now. And I've somewhat semi-retired at the age of 47 and jumping into entrepreneurship here and trying my hand at this. So, I think our background, the way we grew up, really defined who we are, and we joke around a lot. If you've seen me and Donnie on the same Zoom call at the same time, we're always slapping each other in the head and stuff. But we're a very close, tight knit family.
Very interesting. So, I mean, based on what you just said, I heard two Marines. So, were you a Marine as well? Did you join the forces?
I did not. I came out of high school and I joined the Air Force and got into
Oh,
medical supplies and drug purchasing. So I had it very simple. Basic training was 6 weeks, and then I was in an air conditioned hospital, um, and we had lobster once a month on the in the mess hall. So both my brothers give me obviously a lot of shit for
I think.
for being in the Air Force, but actually, the funniest story I remember is when I got to my permanent duty station, my older brother called me base to base and asked me how often and how far we were running every morning as a platoon. And I said, if I'm late to work, I run to my truck because I drove to work. Just a big difference in between the services. So um, enjoyed my time, and that is actually what led to me getting a job as a pharmacy tech, buying drugs and supplies in the hospital, and then actually getting into sales later on. So I use that as a platform to know the right people at the right time, right place, right opportunity, and then just taking a hold of that and running with it.
I think that that's absolutely damn crazy. Because I mean, if you think about it, just say if you're a native New Yorker, either you're the Mets or they're the Yankees, right? And they're in the same state, right? Like they're only like 20 miles apart. So Air Force, Army, Marines, they fall into that category. So for you to be the middle child in a situation to where you're surrounded by Marines and you decided to go to the Air Force, either you're batshit crazy or you was bucking the system.
Yeah, I think I was, and I still believe today that I am the absolute smartest of those three. So I took the easy way out, and I'm glad I did because it led me to my career path, what it was today. So I didn't want to be a mechanic. I didn't want to be a grunt. I didn't want to be carrying a machine gun. So I looked at my options, and it was the best route for me, and it worked out really, really well. But we have a huge history of military service in our family. Our dad was in the Navy. Our uncle was in the Air Force as well. We've got grandparents that were all in World War II, and some really cool stories with them. And my kids, even on their mom's side, they have a great grandfather who's in the Smithsonian. So he was on the USS Yorktown when it was sunk at the Battle of Midway, and really, really cool stories from our family.
Very cool, very cool. So you came out of the Air Force and then you went into like the medical area. So like how did that come to fruition? I mean, obviously you're growing up on a farm, you're running around riding horses, riding bicycles, you join the Air Force and then medical.
Yeah, so it's what I did in the military, and it's all I knew to do when I came out. I had no idea what career path I was going to take, and so I came out as a licensed pharmacy tech,
Hmm.
and when a purchasing job opened up, then I jumped at the opportunity because that was my background and what I was trained to do in the military. So I got a job at a long-term care pharmacy where we supplied drugs and supplies to nursing homes all over the southeast corner of St. Louis, Missouri. And one day, the rep that I bought medical devices from, he just quit and didn't show up. And so the president of the company flew in the next day and took me to lunch to apologize. Told me he thought I had a great personality and thought that I could actually do this job. And so 30 days later, he put me into a sales position, which I had never done in my life. Did no idea that it was a potential career. I had no idea what I was doing. And for the first 90 days, I hated it. And, no direction, no training. It was just, hey, go do this. And so I made a promise to myself that, I didn't really like sales reps when I was a buyer. So I made a promise to myself that, I would become somebody that I would want to meet with somebody that I enjoyed talking to and buying stuff from. And when I started developing relationships, that's when my career took off and things got much easier.
Hmm. So do you think that you were a direct influence on your brothers? Because I mean, obviously, one your brother is a hell of a salesman. So I mean, who was the salesman first, you or him?
Yeah, so I definitely was a salesman first, and there a lot of stories of Donnie and I, growing up in that era, and I had tried to talk him into because I had told everybody that I talked to, right? Donnie has a bigger personality than I'll ever have. Loud, proud, in your face, knows his stuff. And I told him a long time ago that this is the where he needs to get into, but you just don't walk into a door and say, "Hey, I want to be a sales rep," right? I mean, there's got to be an opportunity. So when an opportunity came along for him, while he was bartending of all things, he jumped at it, and then I'll never forget. He called me and said he got a job in sales finally, and it was in the print industry, and I'm like, "You are an idiot. That is going to be the probably the single hardest thing you could have done."
Hmm.
But you got to take what opportunities are in front of you at that time. You can't just walk in and be a medical device rep. So he took the opportunity, he ran with it. I mean, his history and know what he did with it. And I think that's an attribution to all three of us. I mean, if you gave any of us a job as a janitor at any company, we'd be the number one janitor in that company by the end of the first 30 days, employee of the month, and probably getting promoted and working our way up the company ladder. We don't know any different. We don't know how to stop. We don't know how to slow down. We don't know how to not to learn. So again, I think the way we are raised and everything else has a lot to do with that. But yeah, I think I had a lot of influence on him in his early career. The tables have turned, and he is now teaching me a lot of things. It's kind of humble when your younger brother who has 10, 12 years less experience than you do is teaching you new tricks. It's a very humbling experience, but one that I have absolutely enjoyed these last 60 to 90 days.
Very cool, very cool. So I mean, with that level of ambition in your bloodline, right? I mean, obviously, with ambition comes negative. With ambition comes hurdles. With ambitions comes falling down. So on your journey, if you can kind of pick whether it was in the Air Force or whether while you was doing medical or when you became a sales rep or where you are right now, what is like the biggest hurdle that you had to overcome on this journey?
So the biggest hurdle for me is when I left the military, started my early career. I never went to college,
Mm-hmm.
and so early on in my sales career, again, my trajectory was going very quickly. And within 5 years, I was already promoted up to a regional manager spot, managing people, which is something I had never done before.
Mm-hmm.
So I dug into like self-help books and leadership tactics and I can't even begin to tell you how many mistakes I made. Um, just tons and tons of mistakes. And at that time, it was difficult because I didn't realize you could learn from your mistakes. I was learning, but I didn't realize that was the key. I didn't want to make mistakes until I realized that when you break shit, that's how you grow. So once I was able to mature and grow through that process, and then take my career to the next level, where I ended up being a director or an executive vice president. Now I'm in a room with Ivy League graduates,
Mm-hmm.
you know, D1 college graduates. And it was always kind of the joke. I was always the most uneducated person in the room. So um, I dug in and made myself educated, and I made myself learn the company, the products, and the sales process and things like that. So I could carry on an intelligent conversation in any room that I was in. So that was probably the biggest hurdle for me to get over. And there was probably some missed opportunities along the way. There was a few companies that tried to recruit me over to their company, and when they found out that I didn't have a degree, and most of these guys wanted a master's degree,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even have a bachelor's degree. And when they found out, they're like, well, "We can't hire you. It's our company policy." And I'm like, so the fact that I actually made it up and ran the entire nation for a multi-billion-dollar medical manufacturer, um, I definitely defied the odds, and you
Hmm.
know, must have impressed the right people at the right time.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting topic to talk about general education, and obviously you know me as an education chair, right? And I'm really
Right.
big on education, but I am not really big on systemized education, if that makes sense. It's kind of like I went to college and I got my degrees, but I always say I got an MBA by going through the birth of fire, by working for corporations and learning their systems and coming out being paid for it and better educated for it at the same time versus sitting in a classroom applying theories that potentially are outdated.
Yeah, a lot of these young kids coming out of school today, my kids included. I've got 14, 15, and 17-year-old, and I, the path is just so undefined. And if they know exactly what they want to do and the path it takes to get there, and college is in that path, then I'm all for it. But if it's if they, my son right now is talking about being a welder, and then even taking it further, wants to be an underwater welder,
Nice.
and he thinks that's really cool. So what we're doing is we sit down and look at what does the path look like for that position, and a traditional 4-year college is probably not the way to go for that career path. So we've taken a look at 3 or 4 different paths that he can take, and if he chooses not to go to college and take that career path, I will support him 100% because I have so many friends that have gone to college and gotten their master's degree in whatever it is their major is, and then they don't ever work a single day in that field. It's like a lot of people go to get an education just to have the piece of paper and then go do something they really want to do. If people would learn early on to focus on what it is that you really want to do, and then take a few steps backwards and say, okay, how do I achieve that?
Yeah.
Why go to school for this? Like in your case, right? You went to school for some very specific things because you knew which direction you were headed. That's a smart decision.
It wasn't my decision to begin with, though. I mean, when looking back at it, 2020 being hindsight, I mean, I definitely appreciate them throwing me in the art school, but at the same time, like realizing that I needed more analytical data as well too. But that comes with experience. It comes with time.
Yeah, no, that's the hard thing that you can't teach anybody is time, and the things you learn along the way. And I tell people all the time, just slow down, learn as you go. Don't rush through this stuff because 27 years for me has gone by in a flash, and it's been amazing. I did slow down and I learned a lot along the way. I feel like I have a little bit to give back now, and I think that's why I love doing this so much because I get to educate people and help people. And with the networking group as well, I've helped a few people inside the SCN network with a few things in their companies. And I enjoy doing that. When someone calls me out of the blue and says, hey, can I ask you a question? I need help with this. I'm like, yeah, cancel the rest of my day and talk to you.
Hmm.
So I love it.
Very cool. So I mean, you brought up a key number about roughly 27. So like my next question is like the perception of being an overnight success can be a real thing. Like we're just having a general conversation, but in reality, how long have you been on your journey to say from Air Force till now?
Oh gosh, close to 30 years. So um, easily. And people say overnight success. Obviously people don't see the blood, sweat, and tears. They only see what you portray. They only see what you put out on social media. People aren't putting the negative stuff out there, not very often. So they take a look at you and your lifestyle and your company and what you've done and how you've done it, and they only see the positive, that you're traveling around the country, you're doing this, you're doing that, and they don't see what it took to actually get there. And that's the hard part. I used to tell people all the time in my training classes is the harder I worked, the luckier I became. And I only had one person my entire career argue with me and goes, I don't believe in luck. I'm like, I don't either. So if you listen to what I just said, and get out of your head, it actually makes a lot of sense. The harder I work, the luckier I become. And the harder you work, the more you do, the more opportunities present itself. And I think to Donnie's point this morning on one of his calls he had, having intentions, taking actions, and continuing to show up every single day, it's such a huge part. If you build a business and all of a sudden it's successful, and then you see that company not so successful anymore, that person has taken a break. They're not following those steps anymore. And vice versa. If you see somebody struggling in their business and all of a sudden it takes off and they're doing well,
Hmm.
because they're intentional with their actions and doing it and showing up every day. So it's not that difficult of a process to understand. It's just fine tuning your process and taking action on that.
So I mean, I hear the words of wisdom oozing out of your skin, right? So, like this next question kind of goes into that a little bit, thinking about it from the standpoint of time travel, and if you can go back anywhere in your journey, is there one time that you could think about that you would want to go back and maybe have a 5 minute conversation with yourself to put a fork in the road to make you or to help you get to where you are a lot faster?
Yeah, so I think it's probably one of the best questions I've ever been asked. And I have actually thought about this. Donnie and I actually talked about this a lot. I would absolutely go back early on in my career and give myself the confidence to have started my own company back then.
Mm,
I think that's the biggest fear for people is stepping out on their own and figuring out if you can make it or not. Life has a funny way of just working things out. If you ask people, was there ever a time when you were out of money, couldn't pay a bill, didn't know where your next paycheck was coming from, something happened negative in your life, and how many years ago was that? Every single person has the same answer, right?
mhm,
Somehow, some way, you made it through that difficult time, and here you are today. So I think if I would have had given myself the confidence to know that I could be a business owner at a young age, I think I would have done that a lot sooner.
mhm.
Um, I learned a lot on the executive side of the business for so many years and had made a lot of great relationships and friends. But I'm sure I would have learned just as much on the business ownership side of the business as well.
Mhm.
So that's the only thing I would do is go back and tell myself to grow some confidence, branch out on my own sooner, and enjoy the ride.
Hmm. So, I mean, based upon that answer, what I'm hearing is like, obviously you had the desire to become an entrepreneur, but again, you hit that hurdle of fear or the unknown, right? So I want to
Well,
go back. Go ahead.
yeah. No, I was just say, like, life happens.
Mm,
I did want to be an entrepreneur, and then I got married, and then I had kids, and now I've got, in the executive world, right? I had a salary, I had expenses covered, I had health insurance for the family. You know what I mean? When you go into business ownership, all that gets taken away. There's no security net, there's no safety net. So for me, I thought there's no way I could do it. It's impossible. I have to be able to provide for my family. So
got it. Got it. So let's just take that back, right? So going back to you on the farm, like obviously running a farm is an entrepreneurial endeavor in itself. So I want you to kind of talk about like where did you get some of your entrepreneurial insight from an early age? Was it like your parents running the farm, or was it an uncle or aunt?
I have to really, really think about that. We've only got one person in our entire family, I think, that actually has been an entrepreneur over the years. And we're not particularly close with that person in our family, so that they weren't a role model to us or anything else. I think where it comes from is seeing our parents struggle a little bit, work in the way that they worked, and they worked their tails off to provide for the three of us and give us. We I tell people all the time, we grew up poor, but we didn't know it, because we had so much. They gave us so much. We didn't know that other kids had, 20 bikes and new clothing and stuff like that. That stuff didn't matter to us. What mattered to us was, being together and a hard work ethic and things like that. So I know for myself, especially the fuel to do better, whether it's as an entrepreneur or anything else part of my career is not wanting to live like that the way I grew up. Wanting to give my kids a little bit more of an opportunity to have a little bit of a different lifestyle growing up. And this is probably information for another segment, but now I actually regret that decision. So, I almost wish I could have raised my kids on a farm like I was to develop that work ethic, develop those skills and things like that. So, yeah, it's something. You take a look back at things, you learn a lot of life lessons from things like this. You want to do this so your kids don't have to grow up like that. And then they grow up like that. You're like, man, maybe I should have raised them on a farm like I was. Made them tough.
That's interesting. I mean, obviously, even the way you grew up on a farm, you had a close knit family, right? So, and now you have your own family. You're saying that maybe if you could have done things differently, maybe you would have. So let's talk about like your current family life. I mean, how do you currently manage what you're doing in the business world and what you learned growing up on the farm, being a tight knit family? Like, how are you doing that with your family now?
Yeah, so I think it's important. So my kids, there's three words that I say to them all the time. If anybody asks my kids, hey, is your dad's taught you one thing, what is it? And it's figure it out. And they come to me and ask a question, whether it's about schoolwork, whether it's about a friend, a situation, whatever it is. The first thing out of my mouth is figure it out. What is the problem? How can we solve this problem? Instead of just doing a Google search and someone give you the answer, because it may not be the right answer. Let's take a look at what's the problem. I want them to problem solve, because that's the rest of their life. That's what they're going to do. Um, I enjoy working hard. They know how hard I work. They see that I work hard. I've heard my kids before in another room, their friends will ask them, "Hey, what does your dad do?" It's like, I don't really know, but I know he's in that office like 14 hours a day. So, when he comes out to get something to eat or comes out to get something to drink, we always get a chance to say hi to him. So, um, and then I also, for personal time and things like that, our kids have been on, I think, 13 cruises and been all over the United States doing some cool stuff. We take a lot of time to spend together as a family because, again, that's what we did as kids. And we have game night every Tuesday night at my place, and we play board games and stuff like that with my kids and their friends. And I try to recreate situations that I remember. Because for us it was every Sunday night watching the Disney movie.
Mm.
Whatever Disney movie was on every Sunday night at 7 p.m. I vividly remember all of us, all five of us, gathering in the living room to sit down and watch that movie.
Mm.
So, and of course, we made Donnie sit in the front because he was the remote control. He had to get on his hands and knees and walk back and change the channel and the volume and everything else because there were no remote controls back then. So,
And you wonder why he curses as much as he curses now, right?
oh, I could fill up an entire segment with Donnie's story. So, you know,
Buddy. So I mean, you're talking about like habits, right? And so like, what is your morning routines, your morning habits look like?
yeah. So my morning routine's been the same for a long time. I wake up very quickly. I don't drink coffee. I drink iced tea and every once in a while a diet soda or something, but I don't drink coffee. I don't need it. When I wake up, I'm wide awake. So I have a process in which I get up and I get dressed for the day.
Mm.
It's a little bit different, I guess, now because working from home and everything else, I'm in t-shirt and jeans or t-shirt and shorts. But for the longest time throughout my career, I was told early on, even if you're staying home, get dressed like you're going out to see a client. It just puts you in the right mindset to
Mm.
to do work that day. So I did every morning. I'd get up, take a shower, get dressed, and the first thing I do is always go through the stuff that I actually didn't want to do that day. I go through and delete all the junk email out of my email. I go through social media to see what's important. I do my LinkedIn replies and post on the days that I do those. I reply to emails. I check my calendar. It's the last thing I do before I step into my next routine for the day. But I check my calendar. I write down all my appointments on a piece of paper, and then I do some research. I research every single person I'm talking to that day, them and their company. I want to make sure I know them because that's what I care about. I care about their company, their business, learning more about them and how we can help each other. So, that takes me a couple of hours to get through that routine, everything else. And then my day starts with 7 to 9 video calls a day.
Wow.
So I jump into those and get those done. And, I love doing it. And, some are virtual coffees, some are demos for the software, some are connecting with colleagues, some are networking groups. So I try and have a little bit of a mix. I definitely have a little bit of ADD. So if I did all demos on Monday and all VCs on Tuesday, I'd lose focus real quick. So for me, mixing it up the way I do works for me.
That's definitely interesting. 'Cause I mean, obviously earlier on you were saying that you didn't graduate from college, right? But you're saying that you did your due diligence, you did a lot of research, and even part of your morning routines, you're doing the research about the clients before you talk to them. So that kind of leads me to kind of think like you're kind of like a bookworm to a certain extent. So my next question is like, if you could remember in that 30-year span, like what's the book or multiple books that kind of helped you to kind of get you to where you are that you would like to recommend?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I can remember the exact titles of the books, but I have about 36 to 40 self-help books in my library. They're all highlighted, marked up with a Sharpie, notes all over the place. And the one thing I will say about all of the books, some have been good, some have been great, some have been bad. But I learned early on to take away a small nugget from everything that I dove into.
Mhm.
You can't go out and just adopt somebody else's style or strategy 100% because you've got to dial it into your personality. So, being able to take a chunk of small information from multiple sources has I think helped me with how I do things. And then I am a sponge. So when I am in a room with people that I admire, people that I respect, people that I want to become like, um, I write down what they're talking about, what they're saying. I ask them questions. What are they reading? How did they learn that? You can ask the people that I've worked for and reported to the last 20 plus years. That I never stop asking questions. I'm always inquisitive. I always want to learn. It's important to me. So again, I think I started off, you know, without the college education. I'm always in the back of the pack to start, but by the time the race is over, I'm right there at the finish line with everybody. So I just got to work a little bit harder than most of those guys to get there sometimes.
Yeah, but I think in your case, experience trumps education, right? I mean, obviously, you lived the life, you talked the talk, you walked the walk, you earned the certificates, and you've earned the achievements. So, I mean, with that, have you had an opportunity to author a book, or are you thinking about writing a book as of yet?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've thought about it until maybe a couple months ago. I never thought I actually had the amount of information inside my head to do something like that. But now getting involved, especially the SCN group, yeah, it's crossed my mind that maybe there is more up there than I thought. Maybe I did retain a little bit more information from sources and books and people that I thought I did the last 27 years. So yeah, I think at some point, I don't want to do what everybody else has done. I want to do something new. I want to do something relevant. So yeah, I wrote down a goal um, to actually potentially put out my first book, sometime next year.
Nice, nice. Do you have a
Yeah,
title yet,
I don't.
or a topic?
Yeah, I think the topic is going to be because I think with the journey I'm going through now is, I was raised in the hard nose ABC, always be closing, cutthroat, go in, grab the deal, and
Mhm.
then okay, thank you. Where's the next deal, right? And so it's cut, tear off, go do the next deal, and that's how I was trained for the most part. Now teaching an old dog new tricks is not easy, right? That sales approach is very foreign to people now. And instead of selling, business to business or people to business, you're selling people to people. So my approach now has become relationships, learning about people's companies, their businesses, their families, figuring out how we can support them, but then most importantly, figuring out how I can help their business grow. Because if I can help their business grow, they're going to want to do business with me in return.
Mhm.
And that's where the strongest relationships come from. So I think that if I was going to choose some sort of a subject for the book, it's probably going to relate to, even a guy like me that's been trained the wrong way his entire career. It's never too late to start down the right path and adapt and overcome. It's difficult. It's extremely difficult.
Mhm. Interesting. So I mean, with that, I mean, obviously you've used probably several dozen different tools in your career, and obviously you're pretty much an owner of a SaaS platform. So on a day to day, I mean, what tools are you using to maintain your composure and maintain your sanity? Something that if you didn't have, you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing right now.
I don't know. Honestly, this is just my natural thing, and I've never, never been one that had to talk myself into becoming calm or friendly or anything else. And I think that's been my biggest benefit. The reason for my success has been my personality. I've always been a person that wanted to create more friends, and the old adage now is right. It's friends want to buy from friends. That wasn't around 27 years ago. No one taught me that. It's just part of my personality, and I think making some very deep relationships. I mean, I have customers that have done millions and millions and millions of dollars of business with me over the last 20 plus years, We've gone on family vacations together. They've stayed at my place. They come here to Florida to visit and stay with me now for events or just to go to the beach. And these are people that are customers. These aren't people you're supposed to be, especially back in that day, right? You're not supposed to be that close with those people, but I was. I always was.
Mm.
So it's I knew my true identity a long time ago, and I think staying true to that is how I do it. So no supplements needed.
That's definitely fascinating. So, I mean, talking about your clients, right? And you're saying that you like clients to essentially be your friends, or you have to grow into some kind of friendship. So, right now, ideally, who is your ideal avatar?
Um, Avatar, you mean as far as like client?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, on one hand, you're saying like you're looking for friendships, but the other side, you're looking for a particular type of business. So the overlap is the infusion of these two. So I mean, who's that person or guy or gal? What defines them? What does their company profile look like?
Yeah, so we work really, really well with staffing agencies, but inside that staffing agency, um, the HR, the human resource person that's completely overworked,
Mm,
completely overwhelmed with the responsibility that they have. Um, those are the people that I want to develop relationships with because I can help them in so many ways outside of my company.
mm,
Um, I can help them with several things, but even with my company, the things that we can do, the things that we can outsource, the programs we can put in place to make their life manageable, is where we hit a home run. I've worked with so many of these HR professionals here lately, and I can't tell you how many notes that I get from them, right? Saying, Mal, we should have switched to this 3 months earlier
mm,
when you first told us about it, as you completely changed the profile of our company. She goes, now my HR staff is freed up to do what they're supposed to do, and that's their human resources responsibilities. Most human resources are getting pulled into different directions, doing so many of these projects around hiring people. And that's not,
mm,
HR, they're there to do that function, but that's not their only function. But most HR professionals will tell you 90% of their time is spent on, compiling the information and finding the candidates to go to work for their company.
mm.
So I'm hoping to give them that freedom back and give them that time back and show them just how great of a job that we can do and then I can do to help them find that success.
Interesting. So let's stay on that a little bit more, right? So, let's say you have an opportunity to talk to an HR professional, and they're listening to this podcast, and you're telling them that they're your ideal customer and potentially your ideal friend as well. What words of insight would you give to them to kind of help them on their journey to continue forward?
Well, the first thing I talk to them about is, outsourcing some of the stuff that chews up a large amount of time, and there's no return of investment on this amount of time. So we have created a way to do employment verification, education verification, military service verification, and also personal and professional reference verifications. So if you think about the amount of time an HR person has to dial phone numbers, to verify your employment for the last 3 or 4 companies, and then verify your education through the multiple universities or wherever you went to school, and then verify that your personal references or professional references. That's a lot of time that they're taking on the phone.
Mm,
So we outsource that for them, and these HR professionals are getting a couple of hours back every single time something like that comes across their plate. So and it's not really even that expensive to go out and grab that information and turn that around. So, but I guarantee you, if you take the amount of time that person is spending doing that, and then look at it, what it costs for you to do it through us,
mm,
we'll probably end up saving you money based on what you're paying that HR professional to do it. Now, if you're grabbing 2 hours a day, 10 hours a week, 40 hours a month, what projects can you put that HR person on
mm.
that helps benefit the company and the direction of that company versus just being on the phone verifying information.
Wow,
So
very cool, very cool. So, if
that's
you're
usually the
listening,
impact statement that we make to the HR professionals up front. And, we don't even talk about the background side of it. So I kind of roll on that, and
hmm.
it usually goes over pretty well.
So let's say we're still talking to them, right? Like, how do they get in contact with you? Like, what's your website? Your social media profile handles.
Yeah, so we are www.ezactis.com is our website. My You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find Easy Actis on LinkedIn. That's really our only social profiles at this time. We're in the process of building out the rest of them. Um, Keith at easyactis.com. You can go right to the website and click on register. You can click on learn more. It'll bring you right back to me or somebody in my company and send a question. You can find me on LinkedIn, ask any question you want, send me an email. You can call me. However you want to get in touch with me, more than happy to field those calls and answer any questions that we can.
Nice. So then that leads us to the bonus round. Got a couple funnest bonus questions for you, right? And I'm thinking, if you could be a superhero, who would it be and why?
Ooh, good question. A superhero. I think I would be the Incredible Hulk, because I've already got some of the size, built in. uh, I don't know. That's a good. No one's ever asked me that question. That's a great question. I think, man, you think about who you want to be as a superhero, then you think about all the negative consequences that come along with it. So, maybe I would want to be the Invisible Man, so I can just disappear whenever I want.
Nice, very nice. It's one of those questions, man. Like as a recruiter, I used to ask that question pretty frequently, and it used to kind of give me a dial in to kind of figure out the personality type I was dealing with. Like someone that was
Sure.
more of a Batman person was more resourceful. Someone that was more Superman was more A type personality, and like literally 9 out of 10 times they always would stack up to those personas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
awesome.
another bonus question for you: if you could spend 24 hours with anyone, dead or alive, uninterrupted for those 24 hours, who would it be and why?
Oh, we have been very lucky that we haven't lost a lot of family members in our lives. But if I could spend 24 hours with one person, it would be my uncle, uh, Brian, my mom's older brother. He was probably one of the most successful people in our family. Was an executive vice president for Bank of America in the real estate division. Any real estate loan that came in excess of 10 or $15 million, his division was in charge of. He sat on the board for some major corporations, including GMC at one point, and he had some great stories. The guy had obviously an incredible sense of business and understanding. And early on in my career, before he passed away, we talked on a monthly basis, and he used to guide me, a lot of the things I was doing and how I was doing and everything else. And yeah, I would definitely love to spend another 24 hours with him one more time.
Nice, very nice. So going into to closing, I mean, obviously you've been on a few different podcasts over the years, and as a podcaster, I like to give the opportunity, whoever I'm interviewing, an opportunity to host my show. So the Boston Case podcast is yours. You're now the host, and I'm your guest. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask me?
Yeah, I got a lot of questions I'd like to ask you. So, um, first of all, I'd like to know what you're looking for. What kind of an audience member does the best podcast and the easiest for you to work with? And if I wanted to help you out with your company, because it's what I love doing, who is your biggest target and why?
Gotcha. So that's a two-part question. First part of that question, essentially, after doing this podcast going on 3 years, it comes to be more so not necessarily startup founders, but just CEOs and executives and entrepreneurs that have like that founder's edge to it. Just like you, for example. I mean, obviously, you were in corporate America, you became an entrepreneur, and now like you're founding and building this whole platform, the SaaS platform. And I think those people, they have so much to deliver. And I'm just recapping in my head like the last 12 months of all the interviews that I've done, which is, a couple hundred of them. And literally every single time, no matter what that platform is or what that software is, they always deliver a unique story, a unique message, and it's always inspirational. No matter if they're a multi-millionaire, billionaire, or if they're only at 100,000, every single time they deliver inspiration.
That's awesome.
Yep. So that's the first part. The second part of that, like being based upon that answer, what I'm really looking for right now essentially is I always describe it as startup founders that are not necessarily tech savvy, right? Not to say that they don't understand tech. They understand the value of tech, but they more have the investor mindset of like, okay, I'm going to put a couple $1 million into this and then I'm going to sell it and grow it and scale it, but they're not 100% focused on the day-to-day development like a developer looking at the code and trying to figure out that side of the business. They're more so trying to
Right.
sell and scale the business. I think that individual not only is a good person for my show, but also a great client because now we have that left brain and right brain constantly pulling and pushing and working together to get the best foot moving forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's perfect.
What other questions you
If
got,
there
man?
was, yeah, last question for you.
Yeah.
The one celebrity you would love to meet.
Wow. Shit. There's probably dozens I could list off the top of my head, but right off the top I could think about right now
Well,
would
give me your
probably
top
be
three.
Jay-Z, Elon Musk, and who was sitting in that third seat? It's
It's
got
tough when you think about it, you know.
it's extremely tough. I mean,
There's
Jay-Z,
so many people you can put in that seat.
yeah, I mean, Elon Musk is kind of like an obvious choice just because I just think he's on the spectrum and he just is able, his brain is able to think like most people can't think. I think Jay Z is a good example of growing up in the same state and kind of growing from like rags to riches from like the hood and then turning that into like a multi-billion-dollar business and industry. And he's very shrewd in the business person. And that's why I love Jay Z. And the third person I would probably have to like time travel back to probably be like somebody like Einstein because Einstein is just kind of like the way he thinks is completely different than Elon, completely different than anyone else, and his theories still hold up till this day to a certain extent. So it's just kind of like, what would it look like for me to sit down at a round table with Jay Z, Elon Musk, and Einstein, and all of us are throwing back some shots of whiskey and bourbon?
You got me on the bourbon, man. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I think we didn't even talk about that. I mean, let's talk about that for a minute, like before we close out, man. Don't you have like 100,000 followers in like a bourbon group somewhere? Like,
Yeah, so the four founding fathers of a company called Bourbon Nation, the single largest private Facebook group in the world dedicated to bourbon, and we have just right at 100,000 people that religiously follow us. And I say religiously because we have not posted any content in more than 2 years. It's 100% community driven,
nice.
and it's a great way to research bourbon, what people are drinking, where they're getting it, what they're finding, what they're paying for it. If you are taking a vacation, going on a trip, and you're going to this Virginia Beach, for example, and you want to know what's the best restaurant in the area that does a good smoked old fashioned or
Yeah.
something of that nature, you'll have 60, 70 people reply to you within an hour. So it's a great community of people. It's a lot of education, a lot of opinions on how bourbon should be drank. But the one thing I've taken away from that group more than anything else is that everyone's palate is different. To
Mhm.
each their own. Drink what you enjoy.
On that note, I think definitely anyone that listens to this podcast, drink what you enjoy, and I think they definitely enjoyed what you delivered today. I mean, you gave us so much insight, and I think you told a hell of a different a story that's not only heartwarming but also inspirational as well. And I definitely appreciate you being on the show today.
No, I appreciate you having me. This was a blast. I'd love to do it again sometime. And again, thanks for having me.
Well, I think the next time we should do it, I think doing you and your brother at the same time should be an interesting kind of bring him back and bring you back at the same
That
time.
that might break the internet.
It only makes sense. I mean, we'll start off with FFF, and then we'll go from there, right? So.
Yeah, yeah. Man, make sure we're both virtual. Otherwise, we'll probably kill each other.
Yeah, well, I think we should definitely do bourbon on that episode for sure. Everyone
Yeah.
grab your favorite
Well,
bottle.
he's gonna want to do a rum. He can do
Oh
his
yeah,
rum.
yeah,
You and I can stick to the good bourbon stuff.
yeah. I keep thinking he's a spicy rum kind of guy. But
Yeah,
float his boat, man. But I definitely appreciate you being on the show, man. It was great having you.
you got it, man. I had a great time. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
S.A. Grant, over and out.